Good evening, everyone. Good evening, councillors. Let's make a start. Thank you and good evening. It's Tuesday, the 21st of February 2023. It's just after 6 p.m. I apologise to the many people at home listening in live tonight for the slightly tardy start. Can I start with declarations at item 1? I declare the ordinary council meeting open, of course, and acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land, and pay our respects to elders both past and present. Council meetings are public meetings and any information you provide shall be recorded and may be publicly accessible. The council chambers are not a parliament and parliamentary privilege does not apply. Elected members and staff risk being personally held liable if their comments are defamatory or breach any duty of confidentiality. Statements made during council meetings are solely those of the person making them, and nothing expressed at a council meeting can be attributed to the city unless it is adopted by a resolution of council. The confirmed minutes of a council meeting are the official record of that council meeting. Verbatim minutes are not required. Nevertheless, the city publishes a recording of the meeting. Recording of council meetings must not be copied, republished or reproduced without the city's express permission. May I ask everybody present this evening, please, to make sure your mobile phones are turned off or on silent for the duration of the meeting. And for councillors, can I please ask that mobile phones and devices are not left on your desks and put away and obviously not referred to during the meeting. Thank you. At item 2, attendance, apologies, there are none tonight, and I'm pleased to see the whole council here in attendance. Thank you, councillors. Approved leave of absence. At item 2, there are none. Disclosures of interest. Mr CEO, Michael Littleton, over to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've received no declarations of financial interest. I've received one declaration of interest affecting impartiality from Councillor Paul Tuchek in relation to item EN 00123. It is in relation to the award of tender FM 03520, Street Furniture Services and Advertising. The nature of his interest is I am a real estate agent and use advertising on bus stops.
Thank you. No further declarations? Councillor Spencer-Teo, you have one. Would you like to hand that up to the CEO? I'll just ask you to hand that up to governance and I'll get the CEO to read it to the meeting. CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a further declaration of impartiality interest from Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo in relation to the report NOM 00223. It's in relation to the revocation motion NOM 1020. The nature of the interest is that Councillor Spencer-Teo commissioned the report from Inclusive Solutions.
Thank you, and that context is supplied in the report. Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Councillors, I'd just like to welcome Lorraine Driscoll tonight, the new Director of Corporate and Commercial. Lorraine has joined us in the last 2 days. She's sitting just to my left and to your right. Welcome, Lorraine, on behalf of myself and the Council, and I wish you a long and successful career here with the City of Canning. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you earlier today. Thank you. At item 4, announcement by the presiding member, there is none this evening. Reports of delegates at item 5, there are also none. Question time for the public. Before I open public question time, I'll just say that responses to previous questions taken on notice, there were none. And questions from the public. Are there any questions from Sean? No questions. There are no questions for the public, and for those at home, only one member of the public is here this evening. There are no questions. I will not open and close public question time. We shall move on. Thank you. At item 7, confirmation of minutes. Councillors will refer to the ordinary council meeting held on the 13th of December in 2022. The officer's recommendation appears on page 2 of tonight's agenda, and the recommendation is also on screen. Can I have a mover, please? I'll move that from the chair. A seconder. Councillor Bain is the seconder. I've got nothing I wish to say. We'll put the matter to the vote.
The motion to confirm the minutes from the December meeting has been carried unanimously with all 11 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We move to item 8, receiving of petitions, presentations and deputations. At item 8.1, petitions, there are none. Presentations at item 8.2, there are none. Deputations at 8.3, also there are none. At item 9, application for leave of absence, none have been received. At item 10, questions by members of which due notice has been given without discussion, there are none. And at item 11, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery, there are none. We move to reports at item 13, the first reports being the reports from the Office of the CEO. There are no reports from the Office of the CEO. At item 13.2, we move to Ms Lorraine Driscoll, the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial, who was the responsible officer for the following report, that is CC 001 of 23, the title of the report being TPG Telecom, in brackets formerly Vodafone, new lease, lot 29, George Street in Queen's Park. The recommendation is on page 5 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover? We have a mover, that is Councillor Jesse Jacobs. Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. A seconder? Councillor Hardeep Singh. Thank you very much, Councillor Singh. Councillor Jacobs, would you like to speak to the matter?
Just briefly, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this issue a few years ago was quite hotly debated. I'm confident that this is fairly similar. Last time I think I was against it. I've sort of now come to the conclusion that it was sort of past, and this is just simply a slight transition. I've actually come to the conclusion that mobile coverage is quite lacking in the Queen's Park, East Cannington area, and I think something like this will assist greatly in covering those blind spots. So I support the motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. Councillor Singh, have you got anything you'd like to add?
I support the officer recommendation, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to add.
Thank you. Anyone have anything they'd like to say, either for or against, before we move to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC-00123 has been carried unanimously with all 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 002 of 23, title of the report being Monthly Financial Report for December 2022. Noting again that it's for December 2022. Officer's recommendation is on page 20 of tonight's agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for the Monthly Financial Report from December? I'll move it from the chair then. Thank you. Seconder? Second would be Councillor Spencer Teo. I have nothing to add on this matter other than I support the recommendation. Councillor Spencer Teo.
I too support the officer recommendation. Have nothing to add. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the matter? Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you. I just have a couple of questions, and I thank one of the directors for getting back to me earlier last week with some information in regards to a question that I did raise. And this next question, I don't expect an answer tonight, but I thought I'll just raise it. On page 23, item 17, the city has outstanding operational commitments of 9.34 million in the form of. I was just wondering whether I could get some, for my own clarification, just some further information in regards to that amount and what those items are for, if I could, thanks.
We'll take that one on notice then. Thank you, Councillor Sweeney.
I just have one other question as well.
Yep, go ahead.
As I try to make some heads and tails of these reports. I don't know whether it's just me, but I find them incredibly complex. If I could just refer the director to the attachment 2, when we talk about the reserve funds and the trust funds on TPS 33, I'm just wondering why we have two funds for TPS 33. We have a TPS 33 POS contributions reserve, and then on the other side of the page we have a TPS 33 POS contributions for Canning Vale Industrial. I just don't know why we have two reserve funds.
Sorry, CEO Littleton, you able to provide a response, or would you prefer to take it on notice?
Yeah, look, I'll take that on notice. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard before we move to the vote? Thank you. No one speaking against the matter. We'll put the item to the vote.
Motion CC-00223 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 003 of 23, the budget review, as at the 31st of January 2023. The officer's recommendation is on screen. It also appears on page 62 of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? Councillor Bain, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Sabiri, thank you. Councillor Sabiri. Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the officer's recommendation and also note, should this item be supported by council, the installation of the temporary storage container at Ferndale Reserve, which will be much appreciated by the clubs that use the facility there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Sabiri, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the matter or for it? Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, thank you. Another couple of questions, if I can, please. Just in relation to...
I'll just get you, can you just move your mic just...
You reading me loud and clear, Mr Mayor? Very good. Okay. Director Bowe, can you hear me all right up there? Very good. Okay. Yes, on page 66, item 12, gain, loss on disposal of assets. I see we've got the proceeds on sale of land at 24 Magnet Road, which is in Canning Vale, for $750,000. My question there was there a POS contribution to Canning Vale for that amount?
I think what we'll do, we'll take these on notice if you don't mind, so I'll just get you to run through them. The CEO's taking notes.
Yeah, I guess, and the only other one was as well, when Metronet took over our land and we disposed of the land in Canning Vale recently for $2.7 or $2.8 million, was that also subject to POS? I'm just trying to get a better understanding because I've had conversations before with previous CEOs about that, and I just wanted to know whether or not that has happened this time when we sell land in the industrial areas, whether it in fact does go back into POS.
CEO?
Look, my understanding was that actually went into our land asset reserve, so not necessarily public open space. I'm looking at Mr Adewale down the back there, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was the sale of the land for Metronet, we certainly put a portion of that money to Urban Forest, but I don't believe that the balance actually went to public open space.
It was a decision of council too, I believe. Mr Adewale is the CEO. I've got to, sorry, stay where you are, Mr Adewale. Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, the proceeds of the sale of the land to Metronet were allocated to the Land Building and Development Reserve predominantly. There was also an amount to the Urban Forest Reserve, and there was also a small amount set aside for the trail translocation and future management of kangaroos. None of the proceeds were transferred to the POS reserve.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Mr Mayor, I would like to, I'll take this offline and have a discussion further, but of course my interest is Canning Vale, particularly as we all know there's an oversupply of community facilities for Canning Vale, so I'm very interested.
I think that was a council decision, but and you were part of the council that made the decision on the distribution of those funds, so that would have been the time to probably raise it, but certainly if you wish to take the matter...
I did raise it, Mr Mayor, actually, with Mr Littleton's predecessor, and I was told, my understanding was something a little bit different. But look, I'm happy to take that offline.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Councillors, we have Councillor Bain has spoken in favour of the matter. Councillor Sabiri is the seconder and also endorses the recommendation. Does anyone wish to speak against the matter? Thank you. We'll put it to the vote.
Motion CC-00323 has been carried by absolute majority with all 11 in favour.
Thank you, Governors. We move on to CC 004 of 23, title of the report being Monthly Financial Report for January 2023. The recommendation is on page 82 of the agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for the monthly financial report from January? Mover, Councillor Jacobs, thank you. Seconder? I'll second it from the chair. Councillor Jacobs.
I have nothing further to add, but have to be quick to pick this one. I had to fight for that fund.
I've got nothing to add. I've obviously fully read the financial report on the matter. I concur with the recommendation by staff and support it. Anyone wish to speak against it? No? We'll put the matter to the vote. Thank you.
Motion CC 00423 has been carried unanimously with all 11 in favour.
Thank you. There are no reports this evening from the Director of Planning and Development at item 13.3, so we move on to item 13.4. The responsible officer for these reports is Mr Warren Bowe, the Director of Infrastructure and Environment, the first of which is EN 001 of 23, the title of the report being Award of Tender FM 035 of 20, Street Furniture Services and Advertising. I understand there will be an alternate motion. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an alternate motion that EN 001 be deferred to the March 23 OCM and that a SIB be held on the matter prior to that ordinary council meeting.
Thank you. I understand you've spoken to the CEO. The matter is, can I just get that put up on the screen, please? Councillors, we have an alternate motion, which means the original recommendation, which was to deal with the matter tonight, has not been put, it hasn't been moved and it hasn't been seconded. We go directly to the alternate motion, which is simply to defer the matter to March 2023, so 4 weeks' time, and that a strategic issues briefing be held on the matter prior to the council meeting. Do I have a seconder, please, for the alternate motion? Councillor Jacobs. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just quickly, obviously this was a late item to the AB. We all had a lot of questions, especially regarding the conditions and obviously the finances as well. I was planning on moving some amendments and obviously they could have some impacts to the tender process. So rather than going backwards and forwards, I think it's probably best that we take this offline, have a SIB and work those out together. So that's my reason for wanting to defer this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jacobs.
I concur with those comments. Nothing further to add.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against deferring the matter till March? Thank you, councillors. We'll put the alternate motion to the vote.
Motion EN 00123 has been carried unanimously with 11 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. We'll move to EN 002 of 23. The title of the report being Award of Tender FM 033 or 161, request for the replacement of 3 new waste side loader trucks. The recommendation is on page 135 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? I've got Councillor Sabiri as the mover, Councillor Jacobs is the seconder. Councillor Sabiri.
I support the officer recommendation. Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Jacobs.
Just briefly, it's important. Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. It's important that we invest in these trucks. Obviously, they're very intensely used, and to have new kit is to make your kit reliable. And I think that they're very expensive, but it's a very important service that we provide to our ratepayers to pick up their rubbish. And I always think that good equipment makes for good outcomes. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this item before we move to the vote? Thank you, councillors. We'll move to the vote. Thank you.
Motion EN 00223 has been carried unanimously with all 11 in favour.
Thank you. We've got 2 notices of motion to round out this evening's proceedings. Item 14, motions of which previous notice has been given. The first of which is notice of motion 001 of 2023, additional water sources for birds in Canning. The officer's recommendation is on page 146 of the agenda and is on screen. The matter has been brought by the Deputy Mayor Kunza, and also by Councillor Spencer-Teo. Deputy Mayor, you're moving the matter. Thank you. Councillor Spencer, you're seconding it. Deputy Mayor, would you like to go through your rationale, please?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. You look, in my mind, this notice of motion is a long time coming. As I think it's important that the City of Canning look at ways to provide more water sources for local bird life and creatures that call Canning home. As Perth develops considerably, the amount of vegetation, foraging habitat, roosting sites, water sources have been declining rapidly, which has a devastating impact on local wildlife. It means that animals need to engage in risky behaviour to find food, water and shelter, and that often brings them into conflict with humans. Often you'll see birds on our roads drinking from puddles, which, as they have no other option or other alternative water sources, and that leads to collision with cars and often death. One of the main causes of death for black cockatoos is vehicle strikes. So the bird water is referenced in the motion designed by the town of Victoria Park, who now sell and supply them to other local governments. I cannot speak more highly of what the town of Victoria Park have been doing, not only designing and refining these bird waterers, but then providing them to other local governments. It's remarkable. Mayor Karen Vernon and the CEO must be very proud of what they're doing there. I understand they've sold them now to about a dozen local governments across the metropolitan area. And I was recently at a Development WA housing site where that precinct had not one, not two, but three bird waterers across the precinct to provide water sources for local birds. Now, Councillor Spencer Teo and I have been working with a number of local community organisations, including Riverton Primary Campus, Willerton Senior High School, and the Rossmoyne Kindy and Friends of Rossmoyne Park to get them installed in those precincts. And I'm also delighted that the city has recently installed one at Willerton Reserve, one of many future bird waterers, I hope. They can't be installed everywhere. They need to have access to the mains, fresh water, but also it's ideal to have them in sites where there's mature high vegetation so that birds can surveil the area and identify risks. Recently, the Canning River Regional Park volunteers put up some posts on Facebook, which to me personified the issue. There was some forest red-tailed black cockatoos, ravens, and also some boobook owls come down to one of our water bowls for humans and dogs, and were drinking from the puddles there, which brings inherent risks. Obviously, there's dogs around, but also they can't surveil the area. But there's obviously no alternatives for them. They're coming down to drink the water. The bird water is designed by the town of Vic Park of 4 metres high so that they can land at a height that's no conflict with humans or any other animals or creatures. So the City of Canning spends thousands of dollars every year installing and maintaining water sources for humans, for dogs. In fact, we have a dog spaces strategy that proposes to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on dogs, which are introduced species. This is an opportunity to actually provide water sources for are critically needed and for endemic creatures, for birds that live in Canning, but also traverse through Canning. So there's been overwhelmingly supportive feedback from the community. We received an email from Mr Johnson today from a local resident who was very happy to see the Willerton Reserve one. I've been just very delighted to see how much overwhelmingly supportive feedback there's been from the community, and I hope that with your support we can go about investing into more of these water sources across Canning, especially across Cannington, Bentley, East Cannington, where there's a lot of development and more water sources are needed as vegetation is removed. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, I echo everything that the Deputy Mayor said, and as we saw today, like you said, we've had overwhelming positive feedback, especially from the one that was installed by the Rossmoyne Kindy in Rossmoyne Park, and obviously the Willerton Park one as well. On my way here today, I drove past the one at Rossmoyne Park, and it was so nice to see two honey eaters not just drinking but also bathing in the water there, so cooling off after a hot day, and just hearing all the bird life in the park enjoying it was pretty amazing. And obviously that email today also confirmed, the mental health benefits that these things can have just simply by watching a bird take a bath and have a drink. It's that simple. So yeah, 100% support this and hope that my fellow councillors will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak either for or against? Against, first of all. Is anyone speaking against it? Anyone else wish to speak before we put the matter to the vote? Thank you, councillors. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Motion NOM 00123 has been carried unanimously with all 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move on to the final item on tonight's agenda. That's Notice of Motion 002 of 23, the title of which is Notice of Revocation of Motion NOM 010 of 20 from 8th of December 2020 Ordinary Council Meeting. The officer's recommendation is on screen. It also appears on page 149 of the agenda and is on screen now. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? Councillor Spencer-Teo, a seconder? Councillor Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying that this is not about any one person or their feelings or even their intent for that matter. This is about this council today making the right decision. And more importantly, it's about Canning's community living with a disability's desire and their right to feel a sense of belonging so that they can enjoy Canning's play spaces just as anybody else could or would. Just for our newly elected members who weren't here in 2020, a short history. In October, just 2 months prior to this notice of motion being presented, Council unanimously endorsed an all abilities play area to be built as part of the Kent Street Weir Master Plan. This notice of motion essentially superseded that. This motion and the supporting rationale promoted the segregation of children with a disability. Whether it was intended or whether it's an unintended consequence is irrelevant. Implementing this motion would have meant that children with a disability would have their own playground beside the play equipment not specifically designed for those living without a disability. Whether this special playground was a foot, a metre or 100 metres away, the outcome remains the same: a standalone playground for children with a disability and a playground for children without. Now, a well-respected not-for-profit inclusion specialist company, being Inclusion Solutions, People with Disabilities Executive Director Brendan Cullinan and McLeod's barristers and solicitors all agree that this motion does not promote inclusivity, is against the principles of our own policy and should be reconsidered. In March of 2021, some 6 months after this notice of motion was presented, Council endorsed the City's access and inclusion policy. Although it wasn't supported unanimously, this plan was created by an expert group of individuals, 7 out of 9 of which living or caring for those living with a disability and those who are subject to the everyday challenges of being or feeling excluded. The Access and Inclusion Advisory Group, together with third-party support of Inclusion Solutions, created our inclusion policy from their everyday experiences, and as a result, the policy identified 7 outcome areas, all of which seek to have people living with a disability having the same access as everybody else. There was no outcome or desire to have anything special, different, or standalone. In fact, the top 2 outcomes were that people with a disability have the same opportunities as other people to access the buildings and other facilities in the City of Canning. We all come from different backgrounds and we all have different experiences and expertise. We don't know it all, councillors, and that's okay. But here we have the opinions and quotes of 4 well-educated, extremely experienced experts in their field of inclusivity, policy, law and everyday experiences telling us that the Council of 2020 got it wrong. Our own staff recognise that they're not experts in this field either. We've never built an all-abilities play space at a district level before. Kent Street Weir will likely be Canning's first, which is exactly why our officers fully intend to engage with a third-party inclusivity playground design specialist when we get to this stage of the master plan, and that gives me a lot of comfort. Councillors, no other playground in WA separates children with disability, so I ask for your unanimous support this evening to revoke this motion. Building a standalone playground for children with a disability would be going against the advice of all the experts and taking 10 steps backwards in our goal to becoming an inclusive and welcoming city. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I signed the revocation motion and I speak in favour of this notice of motion to revoke NOM 1020 and reaffirm Council's position endorsed through our play provision strategy, our disability access and inclusion plan, our access and inclusion policy, as well as what Council endorsed in 2020 when we endorsed the Kent Street Weir Master Plan. That's to build an accessible and inclusive district level playground at Kent Street Weir. As report EN 02520 outlined, the detailed design process for the Kent Street Weir District Playground will include play elements that will enable the whole community to enjoy regardless of their ability. And I know that Shelley Beach Park Playground, which is currently under design, will adhere to the same important principles. Obviously, 2 months after Council endorsed that position, the notice of motion was brought forward, NOM 1020, which requested an all abilities playground district play area besides the standard play area, with equipment especially for people with disabilities. Now, this completely changed Council's agreed position and the modern philosophy with respect to playground design. Now, I didn't support the notice of motion in 2020, along with Councillor Spencer-Teo, as I did not and I do not believe in segregating and separating children because of their ability. Now, this council has adopted many documents that focus on providing an accessible and inclusive canning, and where we try to remove the barriers and we don't provide special areas to separate people based on their ability. Now, 9 elected members supported that notice of motion, and whilst I recognise that the makeup of council has changed somewhat, I sincerely hope that those who supported the NOM originally reconsider their position. Now, last week, Councillor Jacobs questioned the difference between Part 1 and Part 2 of Councillor Spencer-Teo's motion, saying that both parts were inclusive. Well, the reality is they're not. That's why we're here. That's why we're dealing with this motion. Now, there was a lot of discussion, there was some last week and also back in 2020 regarding the intent of the notice of motion. There was plenty of discussion about the purported intent of Councillor Holland and what he wanted to achieve versus what the words of the notice of motion requested. Now, I have no doubt that Councillor Holland had positive objectives with respect to helping people living with disabilities. However, the issue is the plan wasn't right. The word intention was raised so many times, but when you look at the motion itself, the rationale, or even the debate on the night, the intention was to have segregated separation and separate the play equipment. The motion that directs staff for an all abilities area besides the standard play equipment. The rationale of the motion stated that it's for a standalone area as part of an overall play area at Kent Street Weir and for certain play equipment to be specific for all abilities. And Councillor Holland spoke at length, especially in the rebuttal, about having an area besides the standard play equipment, having the equipment nearby. That is not an accessible and inclusive playground. Now, up until this notice of motion was adopted by Council, the City was going to build one single district level playground that was all inclusive and accessible. This was based on a position that Council had adopted and only formally adopted 2 months earlier. Now, this is based on modern principles, our own policies, strategies that were based on research and consultation with people living with disability to provide best practice modern infrastructure. Now, regrettably, the notice of motion led to negative public commentary of Council, including an article in the Canning Times, What We Are There Thinking. It seems staff were so concerned they sought legal advice as to whether the motion would breach legislation, our own Disability Access and Inclusion Plan. And Inclusion Solutions, as Councillor Spencer-Teo subsequently recommended that in its report that Council take all necessary steps to rescind the motion and the City of Canning to raise awareness of what is considered best practice in the area of inclusive all abilities play space design. There's a big difference between 1 and 2, and I didn't actually realise at the time when we were debating, but it's somewhat pertinent that Donnybrook was actually knocking down the Apple playground at the time that Councillor Holland was using it as reference to what a good playground should be, and they've since built an all-inclusive playground, I understand. So to rescind this notice of motion goes us to our previously adopted position, is to build an all-inclusive and accessible district-level playground, and I think that's what we should adhere to, and I hope that Council unanimously supports this so that we can give staff confidence with respect to what Council expects, the community confidence with what we understand to be modern philosophical position with respect to providing infrastructure for those living with disability, and so that there's certainty going forward and provide the best possible outcome for people living with disability. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll invite anyone wishing to speak against the item to speak. Anyone wish to speak against it? Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I am going to speak against the motion. Councillors, we already have a decision of council from 2 years ago, and we shouldn't be asking the community to wait another 2 years before a decision of council is actioned. Firstly, I do think everybody in this room wants to do the right thing when it comes to disability. I think sometimes the greatest barriers people with disability face is a lack of understanding of disability. Disability groups cover a very broad area of disabilities. Our former colleague, Councillor Holland, knew this, and he made it perfectly clear to everyone in the room on December 8, 2020. The only problem now is, as we all heard last week, the administration didn't action the decision of council made 2 years ago. And the people we have let down in our community are the people living with disability. And this is unacceptable. Our former colleague, Councillor Holland, was always a very strong advocate for his community and an even stronger advocate when speaking about issues of disability and inclusion. In fact, his motion 2 years ago was particularly important to him because of his grandson, who did go to a specific separate education structure before integrating successfully into the mainstream schooling and graduating in that system. Secondly, I do disagree with the rationale tonight that Councillor Holland's notice of motion was interpreted as a stand-alone area. This is definitely not the case. And for the benefit of our new councillors, there was further context provided at the time, which has been left out. It was made very clear. Otherwise, why would 9 councillors have supported the motion? I even asked myself, Councillor Holland, on the night if his intention was to have a separate playground, and his answer was no. Thirdly, the Australian Government's National Inclusive Playground Design Guidelines tells us that inclusive playgrounds are more than just ramps and soft fall surfaces. It's about tapping into the psychology of children and designing playgrounds that support their development. For example, children with autism sometimes respond differently to playground equipment and other children. Understanding their anxieties about playing with other children is really important in designing playgrounds that are not intimidating for these children. So this isn't about having a one-size-fits-all approach, and Councillor Holland knew that and worded his emotion appropriately. In Councillor Holland's rationale, he stated the idea is for a standalone area, but also part of the overall play area and for certain play equipment to be specific for all abilities, which would include children with physical disabilities, as well as non-physical disabilities, such as children with autism. I believe Councillor Holland at the time was just clarifying the need for specific equipment within the same footprint, to the side, but definitely not separate. What he wanted was to raise awareness around children with autism, which is not mentioned in tonight's notice of motion. Importantly, the real essence of Councillor Holland's motion was to build a play space at Kent Street Weir for all children to have fun, another factor missing from tonight's notion of motion. So the decision tonight, councillors, is to either tell the CEO to action the decision of council 2 years ago that was extensively researched, supported by administration, supported by the legal scrutiny of the city's lawyers, and decided with a 9-2 vote count, or choose tonight's motion, which includes some information from Inclusion Solutions, funded by a member of this council who was part of a minority negative opinion against former Councillor Holland. Purely from an academic point of view, it will be interesting to see the vote tonight and see whether those who voted for it in December 2020 may now change their mind and why. Finally, this is exactly why the community become confused and critical of their council, because it seems to take forever to get anything done. We bog ourselves down with barriers, and more barriers are not what people with disability need. They need our support. So instead of splitting hairs and bickering and playing semantics with the wording, we should all be working together to help and improve the outcomes for people with disability. We don't need another motion for our community to wait another further 2 years. We don't need to add confusion, we need to deliver inclusion. It doesn't feel right to push aside a former councillor's successful motion, particularly when he's not here. This was his motion, and just because he's no longer here, we shouldn't be overturning a decision of council. It's not the right thing to do. We need to get on with the job and deliver a promise made by this council 2 years ago.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Councillor Jacobs.
I've given thought to the motion and I'll support it. However, I do have an issue with the revoke of notice of motion. I think it's sort of the main issue that I'll just say my issue. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to vote against it, but my issue was that I had a bit of a hard time that 2 years of sort of non-action, and I think that it would be good to see that if council does make decisions that they're acted on. Otherwise, it risks sort of, if I ask Dad for chocolate and Dad says no, I go and ask Mum, sort of thing. But yeah, look, I've given this thought, and I take some of the points of Councillor Sweeney, but I think we need to always go forward, and the decision of this council technically can supersede the decision of the 2020 council. I could get stuck in the detail, but I don't want to miss the bigger picture, and I think the bigger picture is, including people with disabilities. And giving thought, I think Councillor Holland's intent was to include them. So I'm going to go with it because I think we need to look at the bigger picture here. And I can sometimes get stuck in the detail. And I just think, if we could get a really good playground that everyone enjoys, I'm sure there's going to be areas where people with less, or people that are, have difficulty in some areas can be playing better in some areas. So I think the design can be a good one for everybody that comes to the park. So I've given it some thought, and so I will be supporting the motion. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll say a few words. I speak in favour of the revocation motion, and also with Council's responsibility to reaffirm the endorsed position in EN 025 of 20 that was adopted in October 2020. Look, I feel I must respond to some of the things mentioned by Councillor Sweeney, particularly where he said that the matter of Councillor Holland was fully supported by administration. I believe it wasn't. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think administration at the time didn't fully support it, and I think there was guarded support for the matter based on a whole bunch of perimeters. I was actually there on the night, so I was a party to it, and I actually voted in favour with the majority, and the reason, because Councillor Sweeney asked the question, why did 9 councillors vote in favour of it, and as was often the way back then, no councillor put forward an alternate motion or a foreshadowed motion in case that motion had failed. So we had no fallback position. If we had not voted in favour of the motion put by Councillor Holland at the time, I'm not sure where we would have gone to. Councillor Holland also made it patently clear, though Councillor Sweeney says that it was not clear. He says that it may have been interpreted as a standalone item, but that's not the case. But the motion itself clearly states that he requested the CEO to establish an all-abilities play area at the Kent Street Weir precinct beside the standard play equipment. It's crystal clear. It's unequivocal. That's what was asked. You raised Councillor Holland a number of times. I don't know why we have to make this about Councillor Holland. It's not about Councillor Holland. It's about all of us, I think, at this stage realising that that decision was taken a couple of years ago, and I think as a council and as a community, perhaps even in that short period of time, we've come a long way since then. And given the benefit of hindsight, I very much regret the decision I made on the night to support the motion, and I thank Councillor Spencer Teo and also the Deputy Mayor, but particularly Councillor Spencer Teo, for having the courage to bring the matter back to council, because I think if we all had the opportunity again, we would have sought clarity on the night and made sure that we amended the motion put forward by Councillor Holland to the point that it was an inclusive playground, and that's not what we were voting on that night. So I have absolutely no qualms in supporting the revocation. And I too would ask councillors, I thank Councillor Jacobs for putting forward his support for the motion, and I know that was difficult for him to do, but I too am changing my vote tonight to support it, because people with disability are looking at us tonight. We've got a number of big decisions to make this year as a community on a whole range of issues around people that are marginalised in some way, and people with disability certainly are. And I don't think this was about Councillor Holland. He certainly didn't do anything wrong, but the matter was certainly not clear on the night. It's not clear today. It's not clear in my mind. And reading the motion put on that night, it's crystal clear that the intention was to build 2 playgrounds that was standing side by side, but one specifically for children with disability. So whether or not you all believe that, I think tonight's an opportunity just to revoke that earlier decision, provide some clarity to our community. Then there will be no confusion, because our Disability Access and Inclusion Plan is crystal clear, as was the legal advice that was sought. And whilst the decision wasn't illegal, certainly I guess in some respects the decision made on the night could have been better. And I, again, in hindsight, wish that I had articulated my position a little stronger and made moves to amend it on the night. So I regret that highly and appreciate the opportunity to restore the community's faith in our support for people with disability, and especially children. So that's all I have to say on the matter. Would anyone else wish to speak either for or against before I put the matter to the vote? Councillor Spencer-Teo, you opened a debate on this matter. We have Councillor Sweeney has spoken against the matter. You certainly have the right to rebut if you care to do so, and I'll just ask you to stick to rebuttal and not to introduce any new information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You are absolutely correct in saying that staff did qualify their support for this notice of motion 2 years ago. There was a clear concern over the intent. I find it quite interesting that staff are getting blamed for not implementing this council decision. We should all be very well aware of why Kent Street Weir Master Plan hasn't progressed. We've had several information briefings on it, and it was due to the Aboriginal engagement over the site. So this was not because no one wanted to implement this motion. And trust me, had a design or plan come to this council for endorsement that separated children with disabilities, I 100% would have taken the opportunity to make sure that that didn't get through then. But now that we do progress to the detailed design phase, this is the best time to ensure that everybody is clear on what council are asking for. Just to, I guess, educate Councillor Sweeney, autism is a disability. Autism's nothing different on the spectrum of disability. And the very notion that one person's experience or one person's family member should override that of the remainder of the community living with a disability, or for that matter, McLeod's, Inclusive Solutions, our own Access and Inclusion panel, I just can't fathom to reconcile that within my mind. Inclusive Solutions said there was a clear lack of understanding by those in the room that evening, and I admit I was probably one of them. I was a new councillor at the time. I'd only been here for a few months, and like you said, Mr Mayor, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I wish I had have moved to defer the item pending advice from someone like Inclusive Solutions or even our own advisory panel, because they are the experts. The former councillor is not an expert, and we didn't have the advice in front of us. We didn't have the legal opinions in front of us.
Point of order, yes.
Are we actually still in rebuttal right now?
I think she's rebutting your question in relation to people with autism, referring to a section of the report. Well, Councillor Spencer-Teo, though, I will just ask you again, stick please to the rebuttal. Don't introduce any new information. Thank you, Councillor Sweeney, for raising it. Just a rebut and let's finish up.
Yes, I was basically just confirming, or I guess...
That's okay, the matter's been dealt with. We'll just move on. Thank you.
Yep, so like I said, a lot of the things that Councillor Sweeney I'm failing to reconcile, but we have the experts' opinions in front of us. But by all means, councillors, if you think that Councillor Sweeney or former councillors' opinions or expertise outweigh that of the experts in front of us. But basically, a vote not to support this is a vote to segregate children with a disability. So I just wanted to make that very clear. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Debate is closed. We'll put the matter to the vote and the recommendation is on the screen and is in front of you on page 149 of tonight's agenda. Thank you, Governors. Let's put it to the vote.
Motion NOM 00223 has been carried. 10 in favour, with Councillor Sweeney voting against the motion.
Thank you. The matter has been carried 10 to 1. We move to item 7.5, the reports from the Director of Canning Customer and Community, Dr Sarah McQuaid. There are none tonight. At urgent business, at item 15, there is no urgent business this evening. Item 16, confidential matters. There are no matters of confidentiality this evening. And item 17, closure. There being no further business, councillors, I now declare the meeting closed, the time being 6:53 p.m, and I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. Thank you, everyone. Good night.